Just waiting for our little red button, and look at that. And it's Thursday morning, second session here this morning, 10:15 House Transportation. And Logan Newberry, our miscellaneous JFO, is going to walk us through at least three different potential revenue options that are at various stages, both currently and in the state, not in the state, in other places. We're going to have a chance for committee members to ask questions and potentially other more additional information you might want. We're not at anything other than discovery, discussion, background, and additional information that we might want. But I'm pretty sure from time where Logan is welcoming questions as we go, and feel free to ask for anything and for any additional information you might want them to do research in these areas. And with that, I'll hand it over and welcome again, back again. And
thank you. Good morning. For the record, Logan Newberry with the Joint Fiscal Office. And yes, as mentioned, I will be discussing a couple different revenue pieces. The chair wanted to sort of start the conversation on, get some more detail as mentioned. So these are meant to be sort of informational, get you thinking about these different things. As mentioned, some of these are in different stages than others. Obviously, the gas tax we currently have, so that would be changing the existing tax. The MBUC, I think we've heard, is going to be proposed, a portion of it from the agency this year. Still don't have that yet, but we're expecting some language regarding that and what they want to do. And then this retail delivery fee is sort of a new idea, one that a few states have been playing with, one that was in this funding report that you heard from earlier. So just a little bit on that as well. Yeah, I guess I will mention, and I think everyone knows this, that this is just informational. There's no sort of policy recommendation or any direction that I think the committee should go. And this is just sort of to inform you all so that you all can make decisions if one way or another or what. So we'll start with sort of the one that already exists, the gas tax. Just a brief overview that we're on the same page here. We have a hybrid gas tax system, right? There are two parts. There's a fixed portion, and then we have a variable assessment portion, 4% going to the T fund and then 2% going to the TIP fund. So on the right-hand side here, you can see the top portion here is the fixed portion. About our 11.345 goes directly to the T fund, and then there are some other ones that go to the DUI enforcement, Fish and Wildlife Fund, stuff like that. And then we have a 1 cent petroleum cleanup fee. These are fixed, taxed per gallon. And then this bottom section is that variable rate. We call it the motor fuel tax assessment. Last quarter, or October to December, it was at 13.4, which, as we'll see, is its statutory minimum. And then the TIB was lower at 5.87. So total state taxes and assessments, we're looking at around 32.5 cents, depending on what those variable rates are at. And then the feds levy an additional 18.4 for a total of around 51 cents per gallon. So more onto the assessment portion, just so we sort of understand what's really going on here. Going into the T fund, we have a 4% assessment on the tax adjusted average retail price for the prior quarter. These assessments, both the TIB and the T fund, have minimums and maximums. The TIB doesn't have a maximum, but the T fund one has a minimum. So the minimum amount we will ever collect from this assessment is 13.4 cents. And the maximum we will collect is 18 cents currently. For the TIB or the MFTIA, we have a minimum of 3 cents there. And no maximum. And so then those dollar amounts is sort of, if you do the math out, what the average price of gas would have to be at that minimum or that maximum. So when gas is below 3.87, we collect the minimum. If it were ever to go above 508, we would be collecting the maximum from that portion. And I have the formula here if you want to know how we calculate it, right? It's based on the previous quarter data. So we just take average retail price, take out the taxes levied, times it by your assessment, either 4% or 2%. You'll get the next quarter's tax. And so that's how we know what to pay every quarter.
Representative Pike?
Yeah, thanks. Who's the ones, who's in charge of like looking at the last quarter, coming up with the number? I mean, average across the state, I guess. And then do they like inform every gas station to adjust their numbers on this date?
Sure. So we'll start with your second one. Gas tax is levied at the distributor level.
Oh, right.
So, yep, so we charge distributors based on how many gallons of gas they deliver to the state. So that's a relatively smaller number that has to be informed. And then these rates are done by DMV, I believe. Yes, Chris is nodding. Yes, DMV. So they'll do the calculations based on this, a survey of the average retail price. They'll do essentially this calculation that I have here to come up with what will be next quarter and then inform the distributors. And that's how that works every quarter. And you can go on and I'll show you some data in a minute and see the historical rates for both these assessments. They're on the DMV website, I believe. So if you wanted to look at those, you could.
So Logan, if I go out and buy 100 gallons of gas today and the price is $3, I, consumer, go out and buy 100 gallons. How much ends up with the transportation fund? So is that simple, or how simple can I make the example? I have 1 gallon of gas, or how much money ends up in the T fund?
3 months ago.
3 months ago, I buy the
3 months ago.
3 months, whatever the
We'll get it
simplest
in.
example, just as a real general terms.
Yeah.
If I'm buying it at the pump. How much of what I think out of my $3 a gallon or some number, how much ends up in our transportation fund?
So roughly, depending on your assessment,
A real general example.
33 cents on every gallon. So if you buy 100 gallons, that's what, $3.30? Is that correct, Matt?
That's what I'm trying to get. If I buy 100 gallons of gas, the state of Vermont ends up with, in the transportation fund, $3.30. Okay, so that's on 100 gallons of gas might have cost me 100 times 3, whatever, $300, and $3.30 of that ends up in our transportation fund. I just have this somehow a perception that people think they're paying some
I have
a wide range of dollars on how much that might be going to the state, and I'm really looking for just a real general idea. If I buy either 10 gallons to fill up my car this day, or I spent 100 gallons in the last X number of months last year at some price.
I think I have a slide that will make
$30? Am I doing?
Yeah, it might be $30. I might have, okay, $30. $30, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what, this is what I'm trying to get,
What's
but
the point here? Because I think you said 32.4 for
Yeah,
but a portion of that like goes to the petroleum cleanup fund and then the forest and
sure.
that type of thing. So it looks to me as if not much is missing, but a buck or a dollar from the penny from the petroleum cleanup fund, and then it looks maybe like another half a cent for those other miscellaneous ones. So we might be missing a penny and a half of the total amount of that 32.7, right?
Sure, yeah, the 32 or whatever would be a rough, yes. So it would be around there, and depending on what your variable, your gas tax, or your gas price is, that assessment will be up or down slightly. So it's around $33 or whatever you said, $30 per 100.
out of my 100 gallons.
Per 100 gallons.
I'd have to ask maybe Logan knows, or maybe some of our longer term members know. When this variable part of the tax went based on the price of gasoline, what was the thought process in there? It was like gasoline's going up, so we'll collect a little more, but if it goes down, we won't. And it doesn't seem to be related to the cost to do our roads.
It was to protect us against gas prices going down so low that we would be, am I correct in this?
Yeah, no, but I think when we originally did it, we forgot to put a floor on there. I think on one of them, we forgot to put the floor.
Otherwise, we would be, like if gas was $2, then
Yeah,
our revenues would be way low, so to speak.
yeah,
With protection, and then I think on the upper price, wasn't it, because we didn't want to,
gouge
hurt
people,
people, yeah.
but still though, it was at 5.
Yeah. And we were sorry that we hadn't done that with the tip.
Yeah.
But so if gas goes really low, it's still 30. It's the main price is still there. Doesn't matter what the price is. So it's really just a little bit additional based on the price of gas.
Well, a little bit is a relative, because that's one of the questions I would ask on a little bit. What does 1 penny mean in state revenues on an annual basis in a real ballpark way?
Show you shortly.
Well, maybe we'll.
There we go.
Maybe I'm going too far.
Yeah, so we'll get there in just a second. Before going there, I just wanted to sort of give you this chart, which is looking at all the states, the total federal and state motor fuel taxes. You can see Vermont's right there in the middle. Actually, it is sort of the average for states, with then California being on the far left and Alaska on the far right, but sort of how we break out as far as the gas tax and how much we levy.
So we are actually very much in the middle of it.
Yep.
That's all 50. And as far as how much we collect, we are very much in.
Yeah, I think we were like, right, again, we have
Some of
the,
the other New England states in there and.
yeah, so Massachusetts is to the right here. New York, Connecticut, New Hampshire are a little lower. Again, these are, right, the difference between, we're at like 51 cents and Massachusetts might be 46 cents, so a few pennies. And then things like New Jersey, Maryland, if you want to go down that far.
Anybody else have questions about that? Because that Louisiana has to jump out at me. I happen to have a direct connection to Louisiana, and there, I think you paid $2.35 or something this morning, but anyway, keep going.
And then the last one I wanted to show you sort of as an overview of the gas tax is this historic look. So what I did here is we'll go from left to right. You can see the years of the gas tax essentially going back to 1923. They're broken out by like years that the gas tax changed. Column B here is the fixed gas rate, which has been around since the establishment of the gas tax at 1 cent, all the way up to what we're at today. These are the various petroleum cleanup fees, the other fees that we saw there that break out to be slightly less than 1 penny. This is your motor fuel tax infrastructure assessment. So this is your TIB assessment, and then your motor fuel tax assessment, which is the 4%. So the 2%, the 4%, what they are, these are sort of averages, right? Because they're variable. And then you have your total gas tax as it's been throughout the years. And then this column H, what I did is I adjusted all these for inflations and put them into 2024 dollars. So you could get a sort of historic look at how these would compare today. So you'll see today we're at about 32, roughly cents, which is one of the lowest sort of in 2024 values that we paid. Obviously, back in 1923, we were paying about 18 cents, but that was shortly increased in 25. And then you'll see post sort of 70s, the numbers sort of decreased. They didn't keep up with inflation. And then with the introduction of the TIB and the other assessments, it sort of jumped up. But since then, we haven't had any real change to the gas tax since 2014.
We haven't changed anything since 2014.
Yeah, so that was when
It was 2009.
So 2009 was when we did the TIB bond assessment portion, and then in 2013 was sort of the first, was when the MFTA was introduced, and then it was shifted slightly. We decreased the gas tax fixed portion and increased the variable portion. So that was sort of the last major change.
And adjusted for today's dollars,
Yeah,
this is the lowest.
so these are all in,
that Vermonters have paid in gas tax since 1923.
that's correct. And then going further to the right, so this is using yearly national averages. So yearly national averages of miles traveled per vehicle. I would guess that Vermont's probably slightly higher than this, just because a more rural state, but I think this is a good average so that we can look back across time. Miles per gallon, you'll see is increasing there. And then if you just do the math, you'll get gallons per vehicle, times that by the adjusted gas tax to get sort of what the average vehicle might be paying in a gas tax every year. You'll see it peaked in, in 1997, or sorry, 1971, and then at about 519, but has since been declining, and today it's about 157. Well, as of 2022, I didn't have data for 2024, but as of 2022, it's about $157 or so if you were driving the average vehicle roughly 11,000 miles per year. Obviously, if you're driving more, you're going to be paying more. If you have a less efficient vehicle, you'll be paying more. Vice versa, if you drive less and have a more efficient vehicle.
Based on a national average of driving, you're an average driver in Vermont, and you buy your miles per gallon. You're getting 25 miles per gallon, 24.
Mhm.
Sorry, my eyes are getting older and I'm looking a little ways there. But
No, you're
I
good.
24,
Yep.
28 miles per gallon vehicle.
Yep.
I'd be paying $157 a year in gas taxes there.
Yeah, you roughly buy 430 gallons of gas every year, which would equate to about 100 and we'll call it $60 a year.
$3 a week.
If you drive that average, yeah.
I only pay $3 a week in gas tax. Especially since I carpool.
You probably pay less than.
Well, my wife makes it.
Yeah.
So I pay $3 a week to the state for gas tax on average, if I'm average. Right, but I'm below average, so I'll probably pay a little less. $3 a week. Okay, I'm glad that you presented it, because I think that there's a real fundamental misunderstanding of how much money the state does or does not tax the gas, because the price of gas hurts every time I fill up. But I guess I don't really fully understand where all the money's going.
Please, $4 for EV registration. So they're making out pretty good. Right?
What's that?
$84, yeah. So man, it makes our case.
$89, I believe.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Representative White.
Logan, I have a couple questions. I'm looking at the historical gas tax adjustment and seeing, pretty high in the 20s, 30s, 40s compared to what it is now. And apologies if you addressed that and I was looking at something else. But I look at that and I think, oh, maybe we should just be increasing our gas tax. But then obviously we have to be looking at what our neighbors are charging because we don't want to price ourselves out of that. So I guess leading my question, are we looking at what Quebec is charging just as a neighboring?
No, I don't have
Canadian?
that specific. This graph is sort of looking at what the different states are charging for their federal and state. Right now, right, as mentioned, we're sort of like right in the middle of.
Yeah.
Some states are higher, some states are lower. For the states directly next to us, Massachusetts and New Hampshire are both slightly lower. I don't know what theirs is specifically. But then, states such as California, Illinois, Pennsylvania all have a higher gas tax. So, but I haven't looked into the Quebec. I could do that though.
Just curious, yeah, because again, like looking at our Maine, New York, I think we have to be recognizing what our neighbors are charging, but wondering if there's any opportunity to increase that a little bit.
Anything that we want additional information on or potentially want additional information on, that's the whole point of today. It's not we're not headed to a decision, we're headed to what additional information might we want and different ways to look at it. So Representative Wells.
Yeah, Canada sells it by the liter, so if you base it on US dollars and stuff, they're paying like over $5 a gallon. Now,
As I understand it, their gas tax is about,
I'm sorry, did you else?
I'm done.
No, Representative.
anyway, about half, they pay about twice as much in gas tax. But there's a foreign exchange issue there too, so I'm not gonna get too far.
And my apologies for that, but the ranking, the seniority, the one place the seniority matters at this committee is the vice chair can speak pretty much whenever he wants, and the rest of us have to wait our turn. Representative Casey, you're up.
I go over to my camp over in New York. I pay more for gas over there than I do here, and I thought it was taxes, but they're showing New York's less than Vermont. I find it hard to believe. I can't believe that.
Yeah, I guess I don't know that
Because
specifics. I didn't
higher.
look into New York specifically or sort of what their average gas prices are, but as far as taxes go, right, they're a smaller portion of what makes up the total gas price. So there are other factors that likely are impacting the price, the actual retail price of gas in each state. The impact that sort of the state has through taxes is fairly small. But there is some difference state to state.
Representative Lally and then Representative Wells.
Yeah, we're at a disadvantage too because of, we're so inland, right? So like, I used to drive a lot to Washington DC and, we always play this game to try and get to New Jersey because the gas would be dirt cheap, right? In New Jersey. And, but they have some of the highest taxes, but, they have ports, right? So we have to kind of think about that. And I think we took some testimony the other day, I can't remember from whom, off the top of my head, but that said that we get a lot of our gas through the Port of Montreal. So, so there's a lot that goes into this, in other words. And I think what happens on our bordering states matters greatly. I say that as a native Washingtonian because, Virginia, Washington, and DC, right? It's all there. So this was, I'm very familiar with this.
What you were saying about variables on state, because generally if you look it up, Georgia's among the cheapest gas in America. So what are those other variables again besides state gas tax?
So there could be a range of things, right? We don't say Vermont does it, and I'm guessing most states don't like dictate what a gas retailer can sell their gas for, sort of thing. So there's a lot of just market pressures, competition, how far gas has to travel to get to those, delivery fees and where the gas is coming from, Canada or the Gulf of Mexico or whatnot. So, I don't know. I couldn't quantify like which are the most important aspects in that, but there's a lot of variables that are in play in that.
I think it's the Gulf of America now.
Yeah.
If these questions are suggesting that we should have somebody come in and fuel dealers and explain to us how fuel prices are set across the state or the country, that's a whole different animal, but I'll wait for somebody to make that suggestion. But more questions on this, or are we going to go to another piece another slide on where we're at, the historical? I'd like to see that one again.
I would say it's always an education and, I think there's this sort of perception that, gas taxes like, a lot. And in the end, realize it's really an extreme small piece of what it costs to own a car and drive a car. It's there, but there's far more things that drive those costs up.
Representative Burke.
But it's definitely an emotional issue for people. That's the thing. That's why the federal gas tax has not been raised since 1993, which is pretty ridiculous. But it's sort of this thing of, don't raise my gas tax, but when you actually look at it, it's, you know, and you think about the money that we're missing out on. I mean, it is regressive, so I'm on the fence about that, but I think that if that's what it's for, we don't have enough money for transportation, because the things we want to do, where do we get it?
Do we have any, did you run across anything, Logan, about how much an average Vermonter drives versus an average American?
So I think the agency has some numbers. I didn't find any that went back as far as the national averages, so that's why I use these.
That's great.
I think they are slightly higher. But again, it depends. I think some people in the state probably drive much more than this, and some people probably drive close to this. Just depending on, where you live and what you do. But no, I don't have those specific numbers.
Representative Burke?
I just want to add one more thing to my comment. It seems like, the thing that people, the state is in control of the gas tax. People don't have any control over the price of gas. And that's the big issue, is that it can go up, it can go down. So I think that's where, focus is on us if we raise the gas tax, because people know they can't petition the, make any difference in terms of what the price of gas is.
Okay.
Determined by whatever the commodities.
Thank you, Representative Burke. We'll see what else we've got to learn today. Oh.
So,
Well, you have 3 topics on there, but yeah.
sorry, just
No, you're
just
fine.
make a point that, yes, certainly, the amount we spend on gas, we know what the tax is. The amount we spend really is variable based on how close we are to ports and then the overall cost of oil, which, Vermonters don't have much control over. We'll point out the cost of electricity is something that Vermonters have control over. And our public utilities, are controlled by the state. So that narrows down the variability, I think.
Okay.
So if we wanted to raise the gas tax, there are sort of 3 kind of main ways, easiest ways, I guess you could do it. You could get creative if you wanted, but you could increase that fixed component we talked about from 0.345 up to 12.345. You could increase the assessment percentages, for example, from 4 to 5%. You could also adjust the minimums and maximums that we collect. So from 13.4 cents to 14.4 cents. Pretty straightforward, right? So if we want to increase the fixed tax, in FY26, we're expecting to tax about 284 million gallons of gas. So assuming a steady consumption rate, each 1 cent that you increase that fixed portion will bring in approximately $2.84 million. So for the average person, if you drive 11,000 miles, your car has an MPG of 24. For each 1 cent that you increase the gas tax, it'll be about additional $4.60. And then there at the bottom is just sort of, if you want to see what the different fixed rates. Right now it's around 32 million. You did it 2 cents, right? That's 37 million. Again, for every 1 sort of cent you want to increase it, it's $2.84 million roughly.
And just to go along with that, this is very helpful. With electrification, with electric vehicles and more fuel efficiency, even if we raise this amount, there's no expectation other than it will continue to decline over the years.
Yep. So yeah, well said. And none of these address the overarching issue of the gas tax, which is a declining revenue source. They'll increase how much you gain, but it'll still be declining every year. The next one could increase the assessment percentage, right? So we collect 4% of the tax adjusted retail price. You could theoretically increase this percentage to collect a larger percentage of that price. So for example, from 3.4 cents to or 13.4 cents to 14.4 cents. Oh, sorry, that's the minimum. Apologies. This highlighted one in the middle, the current and forecasted gas prices are at a level that an increase from 4% to 5% will not bring in any additional revenue. That is because we have these minimums in place, and the gas prices right now are at a level where you take that tax adjusted price, times it by 4%, it's below the minimum. If you times it by 5%, it's still below the minimum. And you can see that in this chart I have here. So this was from Q2 of this fiscal year. Once you take out taxes, we have our tax adjusted price here of $5.59. Times it by 4%, we're at 10 cents. So that's automatically bumped up to the minimum. If you were to increase it to 5%, we'd be bringing in 13 cents, which is still below the minimum. So you wouldn't gain any more revenue. You'd have to increase it. So you could do 5.5, but 6% to actually see some revenue increase from a change in the assessment percentage. And then down there at the bottom is the same, right? From 4 to 6 would be the equivalent of around 2 cents increase, which would be roughly $5.5 million or so, a little more than $5.5 million. So in the last one, the gas tax is, you could increase that minimum and the maximum. So here on the right, this is your historic rates that we've charged. You'll see that going back to 2017, there's only been 2 quarters which we've collected more than the minimum amount. And that's based just on what gas has been selling at. So there's 2 quarters in 2022 where the price of gas increased to a level where we were actually collecting above the minimum. But since then, we've been collecting that 13.4 cents. So that would be one option. If you increase it from 13.4 to 14.4, that'd be the equivalent of an additional cent, $2.84 million. And then back to Representative Couch's point, doesn't affect the overall trend of the gas revenue, right? Declining revenue source will be declining, especially as EVs continue to be adopted, more fuel efficient vehicles continue to come out. Gas is projected and forecasted to continue to decline. A change to the gas tax would bump the revenue we see, but it would, at the end of the day, still be declining year over year. Any questions on the gas tax, anything I've mentioned before? Okay, we'll move on to the other 2 sections. These are sort of less in depth because they are new, would be new. We don't have already established revenue sources or taxes for these. So these would be something new that the legislature would have to implement. So mileage-based user fee, you've probably heard about before. We'll be hearing about hopefully from the agency at some point, but this is a per mile charge that is collected from vehicle owners based on their total distance traveled during the year. Right. So far, there are 4 states that are doing these mileage-based user fees: Oregon, Utah, Virginia, and Hawaii, at various different programs for each of these states.
Sorry, EVs, right?
So yeah, I think EVs is what the agency is going to propose this year, but a mileage-based user fee could be for all vehicles, if that was sort of the way the legislature wanted to go. I think right now a lot of the discussion has been to start it with EVs, seeing as how they pay none of the gas tax. But I think maybe the future of the MBUF would be shifting to all vehicles in the future being engaged in some sort of MBUF system. But again, that's a policy decision and one that I think has to be worked out, and what's right for the state sort of thing.
Still yours.
In lieu of gas taxes, I mean, we're gonna get rid of gas taxes if we go to usage fee, we're gonna keep the gas taxes too.
again, that would be a policy decision. I think, a lot of the discussion is to sort of phase out the gas tax as a declining revenue source and to implement a mileage-based user fee in turn. But again, that would be a conversation, a discussion that would have to happen here.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
I would say that is exactly what you're getting at is what we would decide if we or not would propose that the legislature would or wouldn't decide with your colleagues in the Senate, with the entire legislature, whether we did or did not go in all power vehicle direction or electric vehicle direction. Those are policy decisions. I'm not advocating any of them, but the JFO is here to tell us what that information might be. That policy decision is what the body makes. Representative Powell?
It's sort of, we've heard this before, but I think it's important we hear it only once. The gas tax, though, what percentage do you know off the top of your head is paid by out-of-staters? So if we were to, go to all mileage-based user fee and get rid of the gas tax, sounds good. But in fact, I'm thinking the percentage is like 30%.
Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head, what percentage that would be, but there definitely is a portion.
Around 30% from out-of-staters who come through by gas. And, so a portion of what's coming through is not just Vermont drivers.
Yep, definitely,
So it's, another challenge in the
For sure.
overall picture.
for sure.
Are you suggesting 2 different rates for in-state and out-of-state?
Suggesting anything.
How you doing? You're not suggesting anything, you're just pointing out that.
Just pointing out that.
We're not here to suggest anything today.
That a portion of our transportation funds come from out-of-state drivers, which is true for other states. So, and particularly the trucking industry pays across the board
That is correct, yeah.
based on the mileage they drive.
Yeah, I mean,
So they already have a mileage-based user fee.
yeah, the gas tax is in a way a proxy sort of for this mileage-based user fee. This, I think the mileage-based user fee would be an attempt to take what the gas tax does and sort of make it on a per mile basis. So you pay per mile instead of depending on how efficient your car is and that sort of thing. But yeah, they are similar in that manner. I will also say that in the past, this body and AOT has done a lot of work on the MBUF and what needs to happen and what it is, what it would mean for the state, how we would do it. There are a number of reports. The funding study, last year, they also did a full report on sort of their view of the MBUF and what they think and what they need from you all. I imagine they will also be in this year once they have presented their proposal, discussing in detail what they're proposing and what needs to happen. I don't know if I can give homework, but I would suggest if you're interested, at least look through this report. I have it listed there. I think it does sort of do a good job of laying out a lot of the core things and the things that you all will need to think about when the agency comes in. And so then I just put a few sort of considerations there. A lot of these come from the report. So this would be a new way to pay for roadways, right? And as such, it will have most likely a higher startup cost. There will be some implementation fees, some sort of figuring out the quirks and how the system runs. I think that is part of the reason why a lot of the emphasis has been on EVs first, as sort of a pilot sort of test program to sort of iron out this system. Additionally, there'll be some sort of collecting of mileage data, right, from the vehicles that are subject to it. So administering this will be different than the gas tax. There will probably be an additional cost associated with that. And then ultimately it is up to you all to sort of decide if an MBUF is the right way to go, and then what rates we want to charge, how we want to determine mileage reporting and how we want to see what vehicles are driving, what vehicles are going to be subject, if it's just EVs, if it's a broader scope. And then things like the privacy protection rulemaking, and then how do we transition and implement this sort of new program through the state? Again, I think this report does a good job of sort of talking about these things. But again, these are all things that you will need to be thinking about in the future.
Representative Casey.
Now, if we did have a mileage-based user fee for electric vehicles in the state, just like what Mike said on the gas end, if we were to limit gas, we're also we're not getting anything from the out-of-staters at that point.
Yep, that is.
It's what Mike says on the gas, and it's gonna be the same thing if you did them, so we're kind of stuck. I mean, we're kind of like narrowed
Yeah,
to, it's like we're back to this gas tax increase, which isn't gonna last that long.
yeah, I'll just
I don't
say,
know how it's all gonna work unless the federal government got involved, and then they had them, do they actually have like a version of MBUF? Do they
not that I'm aware of.
see that? I mean, I don't know.
I will just
How
say,
it work with the
with-
state, you'd be just like penalizing our residents, that's what we'd be doing.
with all of these sort of ideas and additional revenue streams going out there, they will all have their pros and cons, and there will be no one silver bullet to solve the problem. As I mentioned, I think a few weeks ago on one of my presentations, this will likely need to be sort of a blended revenue discussion, right? You're not going to fix it with just an MBUF or just a gas tax increase or a retail delivery fee, right? It'll be weighing the pros and cons of each and then intermixing them with your current streams to come up with the best solution for Vermont. But looking at each one of these and saying, this is the perfect solution for all of our state issues, I think is not reasonable and not going to happen. There will be, as you mentioned, downsides of each of these sort of programs and upsides of them. So weighing that will be up to you all.
Representative Couch.
I think when we get the presentation, I know there have been discussions among states to, work together. So that there's, not, so that if there was an MBUF, amongst the region, they could, cooperate and share those funds based on mileage driven in the states. So, it's complicated.
I think the MBUF for a lot of people and for a lot of states is sort of seen as the future of fee collection and for paying for at least a portion of the transportation systems as you mentioned, with new technologies and other things, there's areas to expand and work between states and stuff like that. It'll largely be a question of when and how and like what is the time frame of that.
Information related to what's going on in Oregon, Utah, Virginia, Hawaii is in the reports or not is in that bigger one, right?
I believe it is there are some in the funding study, yes. I believe the RUC report, which is sort of a broader look, that's a road usage charge report, has some discussion that looks at a few different things, the MBUF being one of those. And then I don't know off the top of my head if this MBUF report looks at other states or not. Mainly focused on Vermont, I think. But there is, I think the agency has given some presentations, and then even NCSL last year came in and sort of talked about what other states are doing. So if there is interest in looking at these other states, I think that's something that could readily be made available.
Logan assigns more homework. Not as the chair assign more homework. You want to know more, we did cover some of that, and we did have the NCSL. And there is additional information in the report, so as Logan assigns homework.
I'll strongly suggest that it's read about that. Yeah, any questions? Mileage-based user fee, again, I think right now I'm kind of just waiting to see what the agency is going to put forward. I'm sure they will have a presentation and can get into all the details of what they want to do this year. Yeah, if there's any other.
Representative what?
I just had, do we know what California is doing? They don't have an MBUF. And just knowing that they have really aggressive
Yeah, I'm not sure. They don't have one currently. I don't know if they're working on one or what the status of that is, but could look into that for sure.
Doesn't have to see it. It doesn't have to-
Okay.
Representative Thomas?
I just wanted to note, kind of given some of the concerns that have been brought up, given that, this type of tax is inherently regressive. And my understanding of basically each of these areas would impact the majority of Vermonters kind of in their day-to-day life. Just wanted to note there is a bill that's been introduced to create a new income tax bracket and marginal tax rate that is proposed to come into the transportation fund. I just think it's an interesting option that is not being considered here. And it's not directly tied to usage of our transportation infrastructure, but would impact less than a, percent of Vermonters and bring in funding to the transportation fund. So that's not in our committee, but just noting that additional tactic that's on the board in Ways and Means, I assume.
Just at one point, under the retail delivery fee, although I'm getting ahead of myself, that report does not load. It says it's forbidden or something.
Okay, I'll look into it.
If you copy it and paste it, I got it that way.
Oh, is
Talking
that,
about one of the links?
yeah, in the retail delivery fee that.
Oh, sorry.
That is highlighted.
The funding study. Does this funding study?
Oh, those other ones work for.
So it's the same funding study. I've linked twice. I guess I don't know why the second link didn't work there, but I can look into that and send.
This is forbidden.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, went on clearance apparently.
And for you, I suppose.
We're not even on months.
There's something we need to talk about.
Yes, but then.
Okay.
Yeah, on that note, I guess we can go to the retail delivery fee. So essentially what a retail delivery fee is a mechanism designed to generate revenue by imposing a fee on the delivery of tangible personal properties. This fee would be collected by retailers and then be remitted to the state. So how they work is they're typically a fee imposed like once per order. When you go to buy something online, you will pay a fee sort of regardless. It can be done in different ways, but one way to do it would be regardless of how many items you purchase, you pay one fee per order. And then that fee is collected by the retailer and sent back to the state. Two states, Colorado and Minnesota, currently do this. Colorado has a 29-cent fee and Minnesota has a 50-cent fee. And then both of these states, there's exemptions and sort of some caveats and carve-outs within their program. I think in Colorado, you have to do more than $500,000 in sales to sort of qualify for this fee. So small businesses that make less than that wouldn't be required. And then for Minnesota, it's higher. It's $1 million. And then they have a limit where your cart, essentially, your order has to be worth more than $100. And they have some carve outs for certain like medical supplies wouldn't be or stuff like that. So these are also mentioned in that funding study. They get into that in some more detail, which I'd recommend reading through that if there's like interest in that. Again, this would be a new sort of fee being imposed, a new system. So there would be some implementation costs and stuff like that. This would likely be very similar to the sales on the sales tax that we already currently do. Would probably have to go through the Department of Tax. So if there's more discussion that might be someone that you'd want to bring in to talk about how that implementation will work and the process for that for retailers and what they would be required to do. And then obviously there's the big discussions of how much do you charge, right? Who has to pay the fee? How does it go into place? When does it go into place? All these different things. So I think the retail delivery fee is the relatively newer idea put out there. Again, only the two have done it. I think, yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think the funding study, if there is sort of more interest in this, we can to dive in deeper, and the funding study sort of goes into some of the pros and cons of this fee. Yeah.
It hasn't been challenged yet on an interstate commerce clause, constitutionality related issue at this point.
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm not, I guess, up on the sort of legal status of these.
Yeah, I got a alleged counsel question, I guess, but when I started discussing this, asking questions about it, that was the pushback that I had heard from some of our Vermont household name, companies that sell a lot of internet related sales and whatnot, that they believe and that their organizations believe, perhaps, again, out of my element, that there is something related to interstate commerce that may or may not apply. But it's brand new and it's a very minimal amount of money at this point.
Colorado has been around for a few years now. I think they did theirs in 22 or 23. I think it's still going. Minnesota was last year, I believe, or so, but there could be issues that you might want to hear
And the
from.
people I'm talking to are saying their sales in Colorado are minimal, so the idea, that their idea, whether you contest such a thing or not, is too small for them to chase at this point. But anyway, that was an interesting side note, but Representative Powell.
Yeah, this particular idea, it sort of intrigues me. Because I think that it is directly linked to usage of roads. And the example would be, I was talking to another representative about this, and they say, they live on a dirt road in Vermont. And if they stay on their porch all day long, a couple of cars will go by, but 3 or 4 delivery trucks will go by. And I think of it in Heinsberg, some of our dirt roads, big hill roads and stuff. I mean, I can see it just on our private road, which has 6 houses. At least twice a day, something's going up and down. To think about some of these, difficult roads to maintain. And you're besides the oil truck that's going to go up there once in a while, or a propane truck, these folks are going up on a regular basis, back and forth on a daily basis. And so it does seem to connect to road usage, the necessity to maintain roads, and who's causing that damage is paying for it.
Representative Hughes?
Just try to get an idea of what this thing is. So this is on the retailer, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not on the delivery company. So, all right.
Yeah, no, this would be levied on the retailer.
Okay, so, all right, that's fine. That's what it says.
Well, I guess as it has generally been done, again, that is up to you all, I guess, how it's exactly implemented.
Well, I was having trouble figuring out how the US Postal Service would work with this. But okay, if it's on the retailer, I get it.
Yes.
Okay. thank
Representative
you.
Lau?
I just, when you think about our town's post roads, and shortly that will be happening, right? But delivery vehicles, I believe, that doesn't apply to that, right? So, but I'm not sure, but I don't.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Yeah, I didn't.
When the roads are posted in the spring, I believe that doesn't apply to delivery vehicles. So in the spring, a lot of dirt roads get posted because of the impact.
Weight limits.
The weight limits, right, yeah. So, I just,
I don't.
this is where, having our former town clerk would be very helpful for some insight.
Representative Hughes?
Part of that, and Hubbardton does this, but they know their who delivers, and they'll send, at least they used to send us fees there to describe what it is we were delivering, how much it was going to cost, how much the weight was going to be, and then they'd assess a fee. But I'll tell you, it was only like $10 or $12 a truck. It wasn't much and you wouldn't want to put a truck up into those roads anyway. But the point is that it's very minimal. But you can get a hell of a fine if you don't pay it.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm not aware of that. Anybody have any other questions on any of the 3 that we heard about? or Representative Powell?
Any estimate on what the revenues would be from that?
From the retail delivery fee?
Yeah,
So again, yeah, it would really depend on, how much and who and what exemptions. I think the funding study that the agency did assumed a 30-cent fee with no exemptions. And they're estimating around $10 million, 10.9. Again, it depends on how much you charge, who you charge. And when you start charging essentially, but their estimate in that report was $10 million.
There is a chart as part of that presentation. You did alternative revenue options. It lists out the whole number of different potential fees and different potential amounts that we had heard a little bit of testimony on earlier this year. So there is that piece there. And if there's anything additional information wise on any of these that we want to ask about, certainly let me know. And additional information, whether we want JFO to dig into it or ask the agency to dig in it further, what else we might want to hear about. So unless I see some other hands, I guess we will. Where we're at, I think we'll adjourn real quick and then we'll come back again in a little bit. So we're adjourned for the next 5+ minutes.